everyone, it's Lynn here from the Business of Games, and I'm here with my good friend Sandra.
Hello.
And we'll be discussing the Nintendo Direct news that happened a couple days ago. This all started because as I was doing research for my first video, I started discussing with Sandra a little bit about the Nintendo Direct that came out, which made my video a little bit outdated. But after the conversation we had, I realized there were a lot of really interesting things that we were talking about, especially in terms of like Nintendo's questionable business decisions as well as what they're doing well. So I just thought that we would get together, and I invited her over to do like a little more conversational, more free-form type of video for you guys of us just kind of discussing Nintendo Direct. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, yeah, I like Nintendo games, and I'm a little bit frustrated with the situation going on right now because, as a big Nintendo fan, I'm finding it a little difficult to get some of the stuff, honestly, especially with amiibos. I don't think Nintendo really anticipated this general shortage of amiibos, and their whole business plan seemed to be just to get all of the main staple characters like Mario and Pikachu to be permanently on the shelves, where like the lesser tier characters from games that aren't even really as popular, like Marth from Fire Emblem or the Villager from Animal Crossing, and even Wii Fit Trainer, right? They've been called the Holy Trinity by a lot of amiibo hunters, self-proclaimed hunters. It's just been impossible to get those characters if you weren't lucky enough to pick them up at launch.
And I think we were talking about how it doesn't make sense why there's a shortage of amiibo figurines, right? Because when Nintendo first launched the amiibo product line, people saw it as kind of their way into the intersection between toys and games, like Skylanders and Disney Infinity, right? But then if you want every kid out there with the Wii U or 3DS to have an amiibo, then the amiibo should be readily available for any kid to want to have. But by creating a limited demand for amiibos, it seems like they're kind of catering amiibos more towards their hardcore fans. So it's kind of sending like a mixed message to their consumers.
Again, I think it's a lot to do with just the fact that they didn't expect this sort of thing, and also because Nintendo has such a diehard, rabid fan base, because I know Skylanders had a little bit of a shortage thing going on, but I'm not as familiar with the situation personally, but I know for a fact that there are a lot of people, like my age in their 20s or 30s who've grown up with Nintendo and who are like constantly checking refreshing websites and looking for these kinds of figures, and it's like kids can't really compete with that kind of, ferventness, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's why it's definitely that kind of mixed signal. So I'm hoping that, like in the Nintendo Direct, they did say that they were planning on bringing a character like Marth back because of the integration with Codename Steam, which by the way looks like a fantastic game. But, what happens to characters like Wii Fit Trainer? She's not going to get a cameo in another Intelligent Systems game, I don't think.
While we were talking about this last night, I did some of the research about why companies would choose to do limited demand. And a lot of the websites that came up around this topic were luxury websites. Then, they would do that to make their brand look more scarce and more high quality, or make their brand look better than it actually is. And it's interesting that Nintendo feels the need to do this right now because in the end, it's making their consumers more mad than anything.
I definitely understand, and part of me still doesn't know whether this is all like a master stroke of genius by Nintendo, or if it's just because they didn't anticipate genuinely the demand. At the same time, like what you're saying, I definitely agree with that, the whole luxury product thing, because like me personally, I saw the Villager on the shelves. I could have gotten it on the first day, but I was like, no, I'll sit it out. I don't need the Villager immediately. And then now, because of this shortage, because I can't get my hands on him, suddenly he feels like a much rarer, and like I should be grateful to get my hands on him.
I think we're talking about Nintendo's brand was cheapening.
Oh right, yeah.
They were seen as kind of cheap and all was available, like the example of your 3DS. So.
Yeah, I was able to pick up the Zelda Edition 3DS XL during a Black Friday deal at Target for $160, which was a fabulous deal. But now the situation is completely reversed. The Majora's Mask new 3DS XL, which also looks gorgeous, is completely sold out. After they did the Nintendo Direct announcement, the thing sold out at GameStop within 15 minutes. After Best Buy, it was a couple hours. And now, of course, scalpers as usual are coming to sell the thing $350, $400 on eBay. So it's it becomes that point where owning the console itself is a privilege, and that's a little weird, especially since this isn't when Sony does something like this. They had the whole PS4 20th anniversary edition, right? And I can understand because that specifically says a limited model of X amount 10,000 were made or whatever. But with this is more something that I would expect to be able to find in store shelves, maybe for not a long time. And I feel like Nintendo actually does this pretty well, because there's a lot of companies who do limited edition stuff. Like, I still go to the store and I can see Assassin's Creed 3 Collector's Edition sitting on the shelf, and that game's been out for like years, right? But Nintendo actually, when they do a limited run, they mean it. So it's like the Pikachu 3DS XL, for example, was on for a little while and then it was gone. Same with all the other consoles. So. But it's become like this problem when these things are on for pre-order and you can't even get them. They're sold out before they even hit store shelves. A lot of this has been happening with the Wave 3 amiibos, which, like, if you go to the Best Buy website, you can't even get any of them right now. So it's tough,
If we assume maybe Nintendo's doing this on purpose, then it could be because people haven't been taking Nintendo as seriously, because they've been catering a lot more towards, like, the family or casual gamers, and by creating this kind of false sense of demand, or opening up pre-orders for the Majora's Mask 3DS and then having it be sold out right away, it kind of brings back a little bit of Nintendo's legitimacy.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a little bit of both. And like you were saying, they were maybe trying too hard to chase after that casual market, and they didn't really expect the staying power with that, especially with the Wii. It was seen as such a quote-unquote casual-friendly console, right? And then they realized that after a couple years, the Wii became home to all this shovelware, to put it lightly, I guess. And a lot of the more hardcore players, I would say, I don't even know if that's, like, an appropriate term, but they all were kind of complaining about, oh, the Wii doesn't have all the games that we want to play, it's a lot of the more fitness or motion-based type of thing. And so they thought that they could bank on that again, I guess, by releasing the Wii U. And it didn't work out so well for them in the beginning. It was only really, I would say, would you say that Smash was kind of the turning point for Nintendo as a company? For sure, right? Yeah. So after the game released, I feel like both consoles have been doing a lot better as a result, like directly, and then with the amiibo frenzy and everything. So it's been helping them. It's kind of precarious though, right? Yeah. Because they're really relying on that specific fan base, the core of people who have grown up with Nintendo, people who have, like, Smash is a cherished thing for them, and all these other big franchises like Zelda and Pokemon and stuff like that. So it's kind of dangerous, and I mean, it's working for them, like you said, in the short term. Right, yeah. So I think there's that contradiction between, they're supposed to be chasing after the more casual market, but at the same time, they don't know the difference between the DS and the 3DS, the Wii and the Wii U, and that's how they lost a lot of people like that, I guess, because that's the one thing that I feel like a lot of people attribute the Wii U's initial lack of success to, just that people weren't aware that it was a new console.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's to be expected, if you're not a fervent gamer, you're not going to be keeping up with game news as much. And even sometimes people who are really enthusiastic might not know the difference either, right?
Especially if Nintendo is a company that kind of really relies on people buying different iterations of the console.
Right.
And then the difference between the Wii and Wii U is that you can't even play Wii games on the Wii U. And if your target audience is family, then if the family already has a Wii and they have a bunch of Wii games that the entire family has been playing for all these years, and suddenly they had to buy a new console to play new games, they of course are not going to, right? Because they'd rather just continue with this one casual console that they've kind of grown familiar with. And then suddenly there's like the 3DS, the 3DS XL, and then to the 2DS, which is the same as the 3DS, and then suddenly there's the new Nintendo 3DS XL, but there's no new Nintendo 3DS. Of course, this is going to confuse a lot of people, so right. Nintendo definitely has a lot of branding issues too, and that probably is also affecting sales, because it's just, what the message they're sending is not very clear.
Definitely, and I feel like this was definitely evident with the initial launch of the 3DS. It was also in pretty bad shape when it initially launched, and I know a lot of people personally that I talked to were like, I don't want a 3DS because I'm not interested in 3D games, and it was kind of, I had to try and convince them and say, like, no, the 3DS plays new games, you can only get those games on that console. It's kind of like what you were saying with the hypothetical family and the Wii U situation, right? So it's like, people don't know, and they're turned off by the name, they're turned off by, the idea of buying a new console, so that puts them in a tough situation. But I mean, I think Nintendo has been really fortunate just with the software lineup, because I think that's really what kind of revitalized the sales of the 3DS, and especially after games like Pokemon came out, like you were telling me, people were chiming in saying that they had bought a 3DS just to get Pokemon, right? And it's like, I don't know if the Wii U has necessarily gotten to that point yet, but I know Smash for sure has helped it along. Well, at least Nintendo is trying to keep in touch with the Western fan base by bringing a lot more games over.
Yeah.
So you think about Puzzle and Dragons, that's their, I think in your previous video you talked about this, that they're trying to access that broader audience by introducing the franchise characters. You know, Mario has a lot of brand recognition, so like you said, people might be more interested in checking out a game like Puzzle and Dragons when there's those licensed characters that show up. And the same thing with like in the new Nintendo Direct, they announced that they were going to be bringing the Xenoblade 3DS.
Yeah.
Even though that's a new 3DS exclusive, it's just really fortunate that they're bringing that over here, because it took, you know, fan petitions and all of that to get the original one onto the Wii in the States, because they ended up releasing it in Europe, and I think it was a really long time before it came here. And still, you know, they ended up making it a retailer exclusive, GameStop exclusive, which there's that whole nightmare situation that I won't go into, but I was really disappointed with something like that. But as long as, you know, Xenoblade 3DS is coming out here and it'll be widely distributed or via eShop, you know, I feel like that would solve a lot of problems. And I think it's a really great move strategically, because, you know, Shulk is here and he's become like a meme character, you know, with his, now it's Shulk time, and really feeling it. So people are going to be interested and check out the series that this character is from, because that's the same thing that happened with Fire Emblem. The only reason we got the Fire Emblem games in the United States is because of, you know, Marth and Roy. And that's when they decided they'd bring these to the West, and they've actually been doing great, you know. They decided not to localize one of them, and I heard that the latest release, Awakening, was going to be the last in the franchise if it didn't do well, but it ended up being like a global success. And it released unprecedented numbers in, I think, the United States. So I was really excited about that, and that makes me happy that they would be willing to put Fire Emblem, I think that was the first video in the Nintendo Direct, right? Yeah, because before, when they announced Awakening for the United States, it was literally just a footnote. Somebody asked Reggie, are you guys going to be bringing Awakening to the States? And he was like, yes. And then people started getting excited, even though there was no formal announcement for this, you know? So it's like, it shows that they're putting more confidence, I think, in the Western market, you know? And I think that's a really great sign, because like I said before, these consoles rely really heavily on the software, right?
Yeah.
So that'll be a really good, and I hope that they do well, you know, and that'll prove the gamble successful.
Yeah. No, actually, going along with what you said about them putting more faith in the West, we just finished playing the Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate demo, and we were just talking, oh, it was a really fantastic game, but we were just talking about how they added like a beginner mode in the demo, which is different than what they did with MH3U, which didn't have a beginner mode. Basically, you just jumped in and they kind of assumed that you've been playing Monster Hunter for years, which is the case in Japan, but here in America, when you download a demo, you expect some kind of tutorials or explanation of how to play, especially a game that's as difficult as Monster Hunter. But the fact that it had a specific place in the Nintendo Direct, they even announced like the new 3DS XL for it, and like just the beginner mode too is just like catering to a new audience of Monster Hunter players, and it's very exciting to see that, you know, that they're willing to bring over these games that they didn't think would do as well in the West as they did in Japan, because these are just such Japanese type games. And it makes me wonder if this is like Nintendo taking a risk. Like maybe at this point they you know, in their business situation, like do they have to start taking this risk rather than just playing it safe with their typical Mario games and stuff and Pokemon, and relying on Smash to do well in order for Wii U sales to go up, you know? So maybe this is why we're seeing more of these localizations.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I'm really excited about this. I think I did kind of feel this way before, when the Nintendo was still in bad shape after the launch of the Wii U, and I was thinking, you know, now it's kind of a now or never situation, right? They really got to try and get people back in, and like with Monster Hunter, I was feeling a little sad about the fact that Capcom left Sony, because Monster Hunter was such a huge selling point for the PSP, and that's what made it such a success in Japan. But at the same time, you know, when you think about this, I think Nintendo is kind of giving them a lot more support, especially here in the States, because I actually heard that the localization of one of the Monster Hunter games, I believe it was Monster Hunter 3 Portable, Monster Hunter Portable 3rd. Yeah, with Monster Hunter, I feel like Nintendo's definitely giving it a lot more support, and I feel like that's a great thing. And since Monster Hunter is definitely a system seller in Japan, you know, it's sold PSPs, so I feel like it could have that when coming to the West. You know, I know Capcom was probably a little apprehensive because, as you said earlier, it seems like such a Japanese game.
Yeah.
But with a game like Dark Souls having the kind of unprecedented success that it did, I know that it was also kind of a quiet release and it became a cult classic. And you've got memes from Dark Souls popping up everywhere too. So I feel like that also gave Capcom the confidence to say, hey, there's a market for this in the West. We just got to really try for it. And then that was adding the beginner mode for the demo, and I feel like that'll be great, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that it'll become a huge success here in the West.
I wanted to talk about the exclusives, like why amiibos are exclusive to only certain stores. Like I thought that was kind of like a weird business move, right? So,
yeah.
Like, what did you think about that?
I really think Nintendo's policy of doing that is kind of... I've never been a fan of it because, as I alluded to earlier, the whole Xenoblade situation was genuinely a disaster. It was hard to find after a certain point because it was a GameStop exclusive, and copies, just like the value of the game, went through the roof. And since this was before digital distribution, the only way that you could play the game was to buy it or, to do other less legal methods. But, if you wanted a legitimate copy, you had to go into GameStop and pay $80 for a used copy, which is just like highway robbery, right?
Yeah.
For a used game even. So I don't like this kind of policy. I don't know how it will be with Amiibo specifically, because I think there might have been retailer exclusive Skylanders too. I'm not 100% sure about that. But this only makes the situation worse because we've already got, the Amiibo shortage going on with all retailers considered. And then now you've got these exclusives, and we don't know whether or not they're going to be enough produced and enough in stock at those certain stores. So I know there were rumors going on about somebody who hated Rosalina so much that he bought up like 100, and I'm pretty sure that story turned out to be bogus, but at the same time, what if someone was genuinely crazy enough to do something like that? We would have a huge problem, and these Amiibos would just skyrocket in price. Scalpers would be such a huge problem. There's a lot of hate for scalpers, and obviously that's pretty well deserved because these are people who are willingly buying and selling something and creating that scarcity and making that situation worse. But at the same time, they're responding to incentives, and the fact is, if people weren't interested in buying these kinds of things, then nobody would be scalping. If this guy went and bought like 10 of the Majora's Mask 3DSs and then nobody bought them, it would be kind of hilarious because then he would have spent like $1,000 on stuff that he's never going to sell. So, it has to be the whole, the market for it, and at the same time, it's like, people are not willing to just say, I don't want this, I'll wait. If they'll make more, I'll wait until then. They're willing to spend like the $80 for a Marth Amiibo and stuff, and it's kind of frightening. But at the same time, that's what happens when you have that really devoted core fan base. They want the stuff, they know that it's limited, and I can understand it for something like the Majora's Mask 3DS, which they have said is a limited edition 3DS. But for something like Amiibo, nobody anticipated it. They never announced it. Just abruptly, Nintendo kind of issued a non-statement saying that we're not going to be producing those specific characters anymore, and it creates that kind of panic and hysteria that scalpers will buy into. I think with the whole Amiibo thing, it's just them really not knowing their target audience again. This is kind of a recurring theme that we come back to, but it's like, they can charge more for this type of thing, and obviously there would be people willing to pay those prices, but these are mostly like collectors, They're adults who have the money to spend on these kinds of things because they work, but, then you leave the kids out of the equation, right? Because you have like a girl who wants to buy a Mario Amiibo or something. Well, Mario's a bad example because you can get him anywhere, but like let's say this girl's a huge fan of the Wii Fit Trainer. The Wii Fit Trainer's an awesome character in Smash, right? You gotta salute the sun and all that. But let's say she really wants the Wii Fit Trainer Amiibo, but Nintendo's selling it for like $20 or $30 because they know that people are willing to pay those prices, and then it's like, how can you convince your mom to let you buy a yoga figure for $30? That makes it really hard. So it's like Nintendo has to really find that balance. And I feel like that's a really common thing with these types of items because they want to price it low enough that everyone can get in. But then the problem is, it's just the scalping situation, right? It's the same with ticket prices. I've heard stories about musicians who sell, really popular musicians who sell their tickets for really low prices so that everyone can get in, and of course scalpers just eat that up, and it's really devastating. And that's why ticket prices are as high as they are, is to combat scalpers, right? Because you said, like, you have to set the price to whatever the market's willing to pay. So then you see the ticket price and you're going, whoa, I'm not paying $300 to go to see a concert, but then you realize that there are definitely people willing to pay that, so they're just all responding to the market, you know, and it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it works.
I think we were also talking a little bit before this about how Nintendo is so different than Sony and Microsoft in that way, right? And maybe some of their weird business decisions are because they don't really have like a clear competitor like Sony or Microsoft do, which when you have a competitor in the market, it's really easy to kind of gauge what the market is, what the audience wants, what consumers want, like how many consumers from the other side do you want to bring to your side, and maybe combating some of Xbox, like if you were like on the PlayStation team, if you wanted to combat some of Xbox's new features with some new features on the PS4, etc. Like you can't do that. But with Nintendo, since they're kind of just really out there, kind of quirky and weird, and they're built on nostalgia, but at the same time they're kid friendly. But then maybe more than half of their consumers are like over the age of 30. Like who do you cater your products to? And it's really hard to do that. So maybe they really are just confused. A part of the reason is probably because they just don't know like what to do because they have no precedent really.
Right.
So,
yeah, you make a good point, and I feel like that kind of quirkiness is also what lets them get away with, most companies do their big reveals at E3, PAX, all these big video game trade shows, and Nintendo's like, nope, we're like 1 year I think they didn't even present at E3, right? They just did a special E3
really?
Nintendo Direct, I think. So it's like they know that they've got that kind of cult following going on, so they can have, these personalities like Reggie, the Reginator, and all these memes behind him, and then Iwata holding, a bunch of bananas, and it's like they can get away with fun, goofy stuff like that, and they'll know that people will respond to it, and they have that kind of loyalness to that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like you were also talking about how they're kind of in their own world. It's like I hear a sentiment online sometimes. People are saying that, if you just get a PC for games and then get a Wii U or some other Nintendo console just so you can play those Nintendo games, and it's like, it's kind of a dangerous situation to be in, right? Because they're really just banking on the fact that people will be interested in Mario, in Pokemon, in Smash, and all of these franchises, and are willing to get systems just to play those games, because you can't play them anywhere else. I hear a lot of people are also saying that you should bring games like Pokemon to the App Store, to all these mobile consoles, and it's like, obviously if they do that, they'll be cannibalizing their own sales of their consoles, because who would pay a $200 for some dedicated gaming console when they can just access Pokemon on their phone, right?
Yeah.
So
you're right. Like I can't ever see Nintendo actually seriously bringing any of their games to the the Android or iOS market. Also because there's no money to be really made there.
Yeah.
Unless you just like bank on like a one-hit wonder like Puzzles and Dragons or Candy Crush or something.
And speaking of that, it is also really interesting that they're bringing the Puzzle and Dragons thing stateside, because for whatever reason, I feel like the game hasn't been as big of a hit here in the United States. I hear some people play it, and it has that kind of niche within players who are interested in JRPGs and monster collecting. I remember the first time I heard about Puzzle and Dragons, it was explained as Pokemon meets, mobile gaming, right? So it had that kind of allure to it. But I know it's been doing gangbusters in Japan. So I guess that's one of the reasons why it took them so long to bring the game here, because, like, I remember talking with you about it, and it's like, I don't think anybody really knew about Puzzle and Dragons Z unless you're, like, a diehard fan of the original game. And it's like, the game is so kind of under the radar. Well, maybe not that under the radar, but it's not as well known. So there was probably no effort to try to get Puzzle and Dragons Z localized for the United States until now. And with that surprise announcement. So it might be good synergy for both brands too, right? Because I know I just looked at the Puzzle and Dragons page, and they said that they're going to be doing a collaboration with, I think, the game, and they're going to be introducing characters from the 3DS game into the mobile game. So, they've got that kind of connectivity going on there.
That's pretty cool.
It'll probably drive sales for both. I mean, I'm pretty sure people who play the 3DS version might go and check out the mobile game. And don't do that, by the way. It's going to destroy your life. Just as a fair warning.
You can't really expect mobile gamers to go to the 3DS though, right? And then the whole like free-to-play thing.
Right.
A lot of the audience it's easy to get people from 3DS to mobile.
Yeah,
But then
yeah.
going backwards.
I don't know enough about the game because I don't really know about Puzzle and Dragon Z and how those mechanics work because I'm really curious, right? The whole game relies on the internet connection and you having the money to go and keep constantly buying those monster poles and getting them, and it's like if that's not there in the 3DS version, they can't really expect you to do that either because you've paid the $30 or $40 you need to get a game like this, right? And you want to be able to get all the monsters on your own. And I mean, Pokemon has that allure, but I think it's a different beast from, you know, a mobile game like Puzzle and Dragons where you're just constantly encouraged to check back. You gotta wait for your stamina to refill, you gotta, like, go and do these daily events, you know, they really keep you hooked. And I don't know if any of that plays out the same as it would on the 3DS version. So
well, it did well, so obviously something worked, right? So
yeah. And I'm wondering if that has to do mostly with, like, the brand loyalty in Japan, because it's such a big thing over there. They're like, yeah, we love the 3DS too, we'll get this. And I think Japan is a lot more likely, like, the adoption rate for mobile to 3DS. Because I feel like because I know the handheld consoles generally do really well in Japan, right?
Yeah.
Like Monster Hunter was a huge hit there because people could just play, you know, on the train with other people. So it's like, I feel like over in Japan they might be more likely to play a spin-off of a 3DS game, of a mobile game on 3DS. But can you see that happening here?
Probably not.
Probably not, right?
Yeah.
With Puzzle and Dragons, I think that would be the huge exception because it's got that whole JRPG factor built in. You know, people who play Puzzle and Dragons are very likely fans of or have experience with things like Pokemon, these kinds of handheld games. So they'll probably also be more likely to, but I can't see, like, imagine if Nintendo tomorrow announced that Candy Crush was going to be getting a port to 3DS. I don't know who would buy that, you know, and I feel like they've tried, right? Like games like Bejeweled or whatever probably showed up on DS, and I don't think they've done all that well. So you know.
Yeah, because there would be no incentive for the publisher to bring the mobile games to Nintendo. They're doing so well up to the point where they're considering actually working with another company to publish their game. Then they're probably doing well enough that they don't really need that extra.
Right.
Because if they're on the eShop, then let's say you buy Candy Crush for $2, well, you can get Candy Crush for free on the mobile. So why would you want to do that, right? So there's no real incentive there yet, which might be kind of difficult. You know, when we were talking about my last video about bringing mobile games to the 3DS, but obviously Puzzles and Dragons is doing that, but mainly because it's now being grouped together with the Puzzles and Dragons Mario Edition, and people are probably going to buy that because it's the Mario version too.
I'm very curious about the staying power of the game, mostly because the gameplay itself is addictive, but really it's the monster collecting that gets you. You know, you want to be able to get those specific monsters and their different abilities and all of that. So it's not really that RPG type thing, because puzzle gameplay can only get you so far. Like, Nintendo announced the Pokemon free-to-play puzzle game, right?
Yeah,
Pokemon Shuffle.
Yeah.
And I was looking at that, and I was kind of curious, because it looked a lot like the new Troze for 3DS, and it seemed like it played similarly, and I honestly don't know how well that did either. I know I ended up picking it up because of my brand loyalty, but like you talked about in your last video where it's that reliance on whales, and I'm wondering if those whales will really show up on the 3DS ecosystem, because it could turn out that a lot of people will play the game and they don't feel compelled to pay that money. And I feel like that's probably why they went with this kind of game. You know, because like the assets I think are all there. They just took all the stuff from Troze and put it as a free-to-play game. So this is probably a lower risk venture into the world of, you know, free-to-play microtransaction based puzzle game, because obviously they're seeing the success of Puzzle and Dragons, even though it's on their ecosystem now. I think they want to replicate that kind of cash grab that a mobile game can have, because with free-to-play games the possibilities for money are endless, right? But then when you have a fixed price game, you can only get so much. But like you were saying, you know, how sure can we be about whales?
Sorry about the sudden jump cut. The camera suddenly turned off because the card was full. We don't really remember where we left off, but I think for the most part we covered everything we wanted to from Nintendo Direct. I guess before I end the video, is there anything else you wanted to...
I'd just like to say that, you know, we're definitely rooting for Nintendo, right? We want to see Nintendo have long-term success, and I feel like it's getting back there. It's in a good position, but it just really needs to kind of rethink its strategy, its target audience, and everything. And then, you know, we'll be playing Pokemon for decades to come, and I'm looking forward to that, honestly.
Yeah. I guess that ends our video for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. We literally just got off playing Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate demo, so that was really fun. We actually got to play with my friend Christian, who's like a far ways away. We were playing the online multiplayer for the first time, which is pretty cool. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, especially since this is like a handheld first for this console, and it's like, you know, there's all these friends that I've been wanting to play with, but I just can't find the time to physically meet up with them, so it's like I'll be able, they'll have no excuses now, they'll have to play.
It was just like super fun. Like all the new music and then the new monsters, and just like hunting them, like all the detail in like all the settings in the landscape and the monsters is really cool. And you can like ride monsters now too.
Yeah,
which is,
how
like,
awesome is that?
super, super cool.
I'm looking forward to like learning the new ins and outs of the new weapons. You know, like the insect stuff. When they first, I think they call it the insect glaive in the United States. When they first announced it, I was just kind of like, you control a bug? Okay.
Cool. So thanks again for watching, guys, and don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe. Link to the next video and my previous video will be down below. So yeah.